This video is brought to you by Surfshark VPN. Ghost of Tsushima knocked pretty much everyone on their ass when it came out. What on the surface looked like a cool samurai game ended up being one of the most refined open world games to date, streamlining a formula that came to define much of the last console generation. Technically speaking, it was also a brilliant swan song for the PS4, showcasing what the console was capable of after studios had 7 or 8 years worth of practice developing for it. Commercially and creatively, Ghost of Tsushima was an emphatic reminder of how Sony managed to be so successful in the last console generation, by investing in talented studios, giving them the freedom to make the things they want to make, and giving them the time and budget to do it right. Much like the Frozen Wilds expansion to Horizon Zero Dawn, Sucker Punch are giving us another bite of the samurai cherry, serving up an expansion to the existing game that adds a new explorable area, a new story arc for Jin, and a number of new gameplay mechanics to toy around with. Separate, but in addition to that, the Director's Cut arrives at the same time as the PS5 upgrade for Ghost of Tsushima, adding the typical features you've come to expect from a next-gen update. I've played through the Iki Island expansion, sampling all of the PS5 improvements as I went. I'm pleased to report that, yeah, the new content is good, and the PS5 improvements are nice. I recommend this. But neither the new content nor the PS5 upgrades are must-experience pieces of content. They are incremental improvements to what was already a phenomenal game. I envy those who have never played Ghost of Tsushima before, because if you get to experience this game for the first time like this, then you, my friend, are very lucky. But for everyone else, the PS5 upgrades are minor, and while Iki Island is nice, it is perhaps a little too similar to what you've experienced in the rest of the game. Alright, intro block done, let's get down to brass tacks and review Ghost of Tsushima Director's Cut. Okay, so let's do some housekeeping first, since I know there's a little confusion around what's included in what package and the upgrade paths, etc, etc. Ghost of Tsushima Director's Cut is an expansion to Ghost of Tsushima. It adds a new playable space, Iki Island. In addition to that, there is a free update that is available to all players, so with or without the Director's Cut, and it adds new controller mapping options, the option to hide your bow and quiver on your character. In addition to all of that, there are PS5 upgrades being added to the game as well. These impact both the base game and the Director's Cut content, but you can only get access to these upgrades by purchasing the Director's Cut. You can purchase the PS4 Director's Cut upgrade for $20 US, which gives you access to Iki Island, and then you can spend a further $10 to upgrade both your base game and the Director's Cut content to the PS5 version. Alternatively, you can simply purchase a PS5 Director's Cut upgrade SKU for $30 US, and it will give you both the new content and the PS5 upgrades. Finally, if you don't already own Ghost of Tsushima, you can just buy a copy of Ghost of Tsushima Director's Cut for PS5 for $70 US. Pretty simple, huh? Okay, so let's talk about these PS5 upgrades. What do you get? Well, first of all, you get haptic feedback and adaptive triggers, both of which I love. The feedback kicks in during the opening splash of the PlayStation logo and the Sucker Punch logo, which dissolves in after that. It's a small touch, but trust me, it feels really good. You'll feel it a lot when riding your horse, since you can feel the beat of every individual hoof as it touches the ground. Similarly, the feedback will change depending on what type of surface your horse is running on. When it comes to the adaptive triggers, you can certainly feel them when you're using your bow, as knocking an arrow will force the right trigger to lock hard, requiring you to push down firmly to draw that bowstring back. There's a new exploration mechanic at work here as well, one where you have to hook your grapple to surfaces to pull them down, and the triggers kick in hard there as well, giving you a strong pulse on the right trigger when the grapple hits, and pushing back hard as you push down that left trigger. I know people are divided on the value of this stuff. Some people love it while others think it's a gimmick. I get that. Personally, I really love it, and the way this stuff has been implemented here is among the best implementations yet seen on the PS5, though to be fair, that is a pretty small sample size. One feature that isn't advertised is that your controller speaker gets a real workout here. When you call in the wind to help guide you to a destination, it will play through the controller speaker as well. In some of the game's more dramatic moments, when Jin is hearing voices in his head, those same voices will play through the controller. Most satisfying though is the implementation during combat, when your perfect parries will trigger a clash of steel sound effect from the controller that just totally works. When you proc your Dance of Wrath special attack, which zips you around the battlefield, the controller will sound out a dramatic gust of wind each time you move, and it's just super cool. I loved it. So yeah, Sucker Punch really put a lot of effort into getting the most out of the PS5 controller, and I think their work paid off. The PS5 version also comes with 3D audio. I do play games with a mix of both headphones and 5.1 surround sound. I won't lie, I didn't feel the benefits of this as much as I did from other games like Returnal, for example. In Returnal, there's so much scope to create these dense walls of sound coming at you from every direction. Here in Ghost of Tsushima, there's less potential to kind of overwhelm you with sound, and I found the original 5.1 mix was already giving me all the information I needed about enemy locations. I definitely recall relying on my ears a lot during my original playthrough of the game, and that hasn't changed here as a result of the 3D audio, but nor does it feel greatly enhanced by it. Faster loading times are a thing, yes. Here's me fast traveling. And here's me recovering from a death. As you can see, load times are pretty much gone. Thank you very much, PS5 SSD. The PS5 version does offer dynamic 4K resolution targeting 60 FPS. Now, as always, I'll leave the details on this to Digital Foundry, but I will point out that there was already a 60 FPS update pushed out for free last year, so the Director's Cut is not the only way to get this game running at 60 FPS. When it comes to the resolution stuff though, I don't like talking about that because it's dynamic and I don't have all the tools to properly assess it. Long story short though, Ghost of Tsushima always looked incredible, no matter what resolution it was running at. 60 FPS is a thing that I really cared about, and I already had that last year. This update may increase overall visual fidelity, but similar to the sound improvements, they aren't changes that substantially increase my appreciation for this title. This brings us to perhaps the most interesting change offered by the PS5 upgrade, Japanese lip sync. So if you played the original, you might remember that the game offered both an English and a Japanese voice track, but the Japanese track was the dub. You'd have these characters speaking Japanese, but their lips would be mouthing English words. This rendered that dub basically useless because I just couldn't get past how goofy it was to see Japanese people fighting in feudal Japan, clad in full samurai armor, speaking Japanese, but their mouths were speaking English. That was just a little bit too much for me. So exclusive to the PS5 upgrade is Japanese lip sync. It's interesting tech because what the game is doing here is it isn't playing a pre-recorded cutscene saved on the game's client, it's actually rendering the cutscene in real time, and because of this, Sucker Punch have been able to include this alternative lip syncing without the install size of your game ballooning, because otherwise you'd have to upload 2 copies of every cutscene, one with English lip sync and another with Japanese. So exciting as this is, this lip sync isn't great. If you go back and watch some of the English lip sync, you'll see it's pretty spot on. With the Japanese lip sync, their lips move kind of weirdly, a bit over-exaggerated, and the overall sync doesn't quite match up with what people are saying.
心を蝕む病だろ。もし島中に広がったら。
そうはさせん。
In short, there is a difference in quality between the English lip sync and the Japanese lip sync, and while I still think the Japanese voice track is the best option to use because it feels the most authentic, it's a little disappointing that Sucker Punch weren't able to nail the Japanese sync as well as they nailed the English sync. So those are all the PS5 upgrades. I guess there's a basic question to be asked here. Is it worth experiencing this game again because of these upgrades? Do they vastly change or improve the game? I'd say no. These improvements are generally fairly minor, especially considering that the game already looked and sounded phenomenal on the PS4. Having said that, I think Ghost of Tsushima is just worth playing again in general, and these changes are going to make that second or third playthrough more enjoyable. They aren't an excuse for another playthrough, but they're things you'll appreciate if you do happen to do another playthrough, which I think is more than fine. Okay, so that's all the PS5 stuff. Let's talk about Iki Island. Your journey to Iki Island begins in your menu. A new section has been added that tracks your journey. You select it, and the wind will guide you to your destination, a seaside village under attack from supernaturally charged Mongols. You learn that they've come from nearby Iki Island, a place that Jin is intimately familiar with as it was the scene of a traumatic moment in his past. Forced to confront both the external threat and his internal demons, Jin hops aboard a boat to begin his odyssey to Iki. Upon arriving, you're informed by in-game prompts that the progression here is separate from the rest of the game. Some of the exploration-based unlocks you've acquired don't work here, meaning that you'll need to repurchase the nodes that will guide you to things like the haiku spots. There's also a new combat technique that's been added that is particularly awesome. Yes, your horse can now charge things, and I can assure you that with the haptic feedback, it is a very satisfying collision. Beyond that, you keep all of your existing gear, your upgrades, your combat techniques, all of that stays with you. That's good because Iki Island is definitely among the most challenging content you'll find in Ghost of Tsushima, so much so that the game explicitly warns you about that just before you get on that boat. So just to be clear, you can access Iki Island at any time after you've reached Act 2 in the game, and if you have a PS4 save, you can upload that to the cloud and then download that to your PS5 so you can go straight there. Even though you can access all of this from Act 2, I was really glad that I did the story arc after having completed the game, and that was for two reasons. Firstly, as I said earlier, Iki Island is definitely a step up in terms of combat. Not a massive step, but it is noticeable. I can't show you a lot of the larger battles here because Sony has asked us to avoid spoilers, but I have no problem telling you that these battles fought on Iki Island are the most populated and most relentless. There's just so many combatants in the field, and you move from stage to stage with very little downtime. It's great, I love it, but it will push you, especially if you've forgotten how to play the game, which is what happened to me since it'd been a long time since I'd finished the original game. Combat difficulty isn't just about numbers though. There's a new enemy type added to the field who also ups the ante. The shaman enemy positions himself at the back of the field and begins chanting his haunting dirge that will buff his allies. The troops under the effect of this buff will spam their most challenging attacks and will recover from your attacks more quickly, forcing you to locate this shaman and take him out first, lest the rest of the encounter becomes significantly more difficult. Outside of the new enemy type and the horse charge, Iki Island doesn't offer up much in the way of new combat experiences. There are no new weapons, no new fighting techniques, there weren't any encounters which felt fundamentally different to the encounters I'd played through in the main game. I was a little disappointed by this, as I'd spent a fair chunk of time playing the Legends multiplayer mode, which adds substantially more variation to the combat formula. There are entirely new combat abilities, new gear sets that greatly augment your playstyle, a lot of new enemy types, new traversal challenges, new combat-based puzzles. There's a lot there, and by the way, that game mode is just awesome, and if you haven't, you should totally play it. It's fantastic. With so much new stuff added to the combat experience in Legends, I had really high hopes for what Sucker Punch would add here in Iki. The answer is not much, and I get why that's the case because it has to fit within the structure of the existing game, but at the very start of the experience, it does make clear that this is separate, with separate abilities and separate progression. I think Sucker Punch could have taken a lot more creative license with that sort of setup. So the other reason I was glad I played this after finishing the main game is that its story arc feels best resolved after Jin has defeated the Mongols on his home island of Tsushima. This is a very introspective chapter in Jin's saga, one where he confronts his previous trauma and his inner demons. The catalyst for that is the Eagle, a shamanistic witch who finds a way into Jin's head and is able to communicate with him. Throughout his journey, Jin regularly tumbles into delirious visions, the world shifting beneath his feet as imaginary foes fade in and out of view. Visually, tonally, narratively, this chapter has its own identity quite separate to the rest of the game, and yet it still feels connected to the central saga of Jin's life. This story is an essential element of his legend, not a random side quest for side quest's sake. That makes it very worth experiencing if you're someone that's invested in Jin's story, but less essential if you're just there to give your katana arm a good workout. Iki Island is very similar to Tsushima, which again I was a little bit bummed out by. One of the defining aspects of the original game was how different its biomes could be, with its use of color in particular creating such a clear dividing line between one area and the next. This pronounced visual identity was buttressed by the multiplayer mode, which served up a radically different take on Tsushima's spaces while still remaining wholly consistent with the source material. Iki is positioned as this other place, a land of dark magics and the occult. I went there expecting to see dark fortresses and nightmarish bandit camps, but none of that was there. It was the same color palette, the same geography, and the same architecture. The multiplayer mode showed us how far the world of Tsushima could be stretched without breaking, and I think there was more room for Sucker Punch's artists to flex their muscle here to create an identity that Iki Island just never ends up achieving. Structurally, Iki is also similar to what you've experienced earlier, albeit with some nice new experiences. There's an archery challenge now. There's an enemy-based sparring tournament, which is nice since each combatant is their own unique puzzle that needs to be solved. And best of all, there is a new Guitar Hero style minigame where you have to tilt your controller to keep the little green ball in place so you can play the flute and get the animals to be your friend. This was awesome. But yeah, beyond that, it's more haiku spots and climbing challenges and all the stuff you've seen before, and that's not a bad thing. One of the things I loved most about Ghost of Tsushima was how inviting all of that stuff was. I really tried to focus on completing the main story arc quickly, but I'd always find myself getting sidetracked by some bird inviting me to follow, or a side quest I'd stumble upon. The effortless sense of discovery, that incentivized wandering aimlessness, is still firmly at work here, and it remains one of the best parts of the game. If you're wondering how long that main story arc is, it's not long. I think you'd be able to get through it in maybe 3 hours, tops. I don't know exactly, I took some detours along the way, so don't quote me on that, but it's in that ballpark. On top of that, there's also a handful of side quests, which will run you a few hours as well, and then there's all the completionist map marker stuff, which, you know, I didn't clear every map marker, but they're there. Rough number, I think this is about a 5-hour experience for most people, and it's probably a 10-hour experience for completionists, give or take. Again, don't quote me. As much as I enjoyed Iki Island, I can't help but feel as though it's been a little upstaged by the multiplayer mode, which is about to get even more free content soon, by the way, and its own standalone version, which you'll be able to purchase without having to purchase the single-player game at all. That game mode is so bursting with new enemies, new gear, new progression, new combat mechanics, new areas, this striking visual presence, and that game mode is totally free. Ironically, Ghost of Tsushima's paid expansion is a lot less ambitious than its multiplayer counterpart. It's still good, it's still worth playing, I still recommend it, but it's definitely not an essential must-play experience like I think the multiplayer is. I really love that game mode. Anyway, that's my review for Ghost of Tsushima Director's Cut. I'm looking forward to Ghost of Tsushima 2. Guys, let's be real here. We're nerds. We're cool nerds, but we're nerds nonetheless. We play video games. We know what HDR means, sort of. We watch Loki and Invincible and The Boys and Downton Abbey. Wait, what? How'd that last one get in there? Point is, we live much of our lives online, and that means our data is just hanging out there. Our passwords, our IP address, our personal information. It's all over the World Wide Web, and in 2021, we can't just not think about that. We have to take steps to protect our data. Enter Surfshark VPN, the single best means of protecting your online security. Surfshark VPN encrypts your online data, protecting you from identity thefts and hacks, and their clean web feature automatically blocks over 1 million known malicious websites, phishing methods, and other threats. But if the security aspect doesn't hook you, it also lets you access geo-blocked content, something particularly useful here in Australia since pretty much everything is geo-blocked. With Surfshark VPN, I can just boot it up, select a server location, and immediately begin accessing international streaming content in seconds. You can use Surfshark on multiple devices at once, which is something that almost no other VPN allows. It's available on pretty much every platform you can think of. It has 24/7 customer support, and it has a full 30-day money-back guarantee. Best of all, they're offering an 83% discount and 3 months free when you use offer code SKILLUP at checkout. Click the link in the description below or visit surfshark.deals/skillup. Thanks Surfshark for sponsoring the video, and thank you for watching it. Thanks for watching my video. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, give it a thumbs down so I know to do better for next time. If you enjoyed yourself, consider subscribing, and if you really enjoyed yourself, maybe consider hitting that notification bell so you never miss a video. You can see my patrons here on the left. They're awesome. They're amazing. If you want to join them, check out my Patreon page. Thank you again. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.